What is the price of becoming a god's weapon? We look upon the Adeptus Astartes and see only glory. We see the ceramite, the bolter, the towering stature of the Emperor's angels of death. We imagine the thrill of power, the absolute certainty of purpose, and the freedom from the petty fears that plague mortal men. But this is a lie. It is a propaganda tapestry woven to hide a much darker, visceral reality. To be a space marine is not to be a hero. It is to be a survivor of a systematic mutilation of the soul. It is to have your humanity cut away with a scalpel piece by bloody piece, until only a biological killing machine remains. The nightmare of the 41st millennium is not just the aliens or the heretics screaming at the gates. The true nightmare is what happens inside the mind of the transhuman warrior who has forgotten how to dream. They are the defenders of humanity, yet they are complete strangers to it. They are immortal, yet they are already dead. If you wish to peer behind the veil of Imperial propaganda and understand the tragic anatomy of the Astartes, you must join us in the deep archives. Aid this channel in its crusade for the truth by liking this transmission and subscribing to the frequency. Only by preserving the lore can we hope to understand the sacrifices made in the dark. To understand the nightmare of the Adeptus Astartes, one must first strip away the gold and the glory. You must look past the banners of the Indomitus Crusade and the heroic statues that line the avenue of the victorious on Terra. You must look into the mud, into the radioactive sludge of the Underhive, or the frozen wastes of a feral death world. The story of a space marine does not begin with a weapon in hand. It begins with a child, shivering in the dark, realizing that his life is no longer his own. The Imperium of man is a regime built upon the backs of martyrs. But the Astartes are a unique breed of sacrifice because their martyrdom begins before they have even become men. The first horror of their existence is the selection itself. It is a common misconception among the soft, civilized populations of the shrine worlds that becoming an angel of death is an honor one volunteers for, like joining the Imperial Guard or the Navy. This is a falsehood born of ignorance. You do not volunteer to become a space marine. You are taken. You are culled from the herd because you have shown a capacity for violence that exceeds your years. Consider the environments from which these aspirants are plucked. The chapters of the Adeptus Astartes do not recruit from the well-fed, educated nobility of the Spire families. They do not want those who have known comfort, for comfort breeds weakness, and the gene seed requires a host of iron resilience. Instead, they descend upon the worlds where life is cheap and survival is a daily miracle. On the jagged cliffs of Fenris, a boy holds a spear made of bone, watching his kin die to the claws of a kraken. In the toxic sumps of Necromunda, a gang scummer cuts the throat of a rival over a canister of recycled water. These are the recruiting grounds. The chaplains and apothecaries descend from the heavens in thunderhawks that scream like dragons, their ceramite armor stained with the smoke of 1,000 wars. To a 10-year-old boy, these figures are not men. They are terrifying giants, avatars of destruction that move with a speed that defies their bulk. The sheer phenomenon of transhuman dread affects even these hardened children, the biological imperative to flee from a predator that is so clearly superior to you. But they cannot flee. They must stand and prove they are worth the breaking. The selection trials are the first filter, and they are designed to be lethal. This is not a military academy entrance exam where a failing grade means being sent home to your parents. Here, failure is synonymous with death. The chapter does not have the resources to waste on the weak, and they certainly do not have the mercy to return a failed aspirant to his previous life. To return is to reveal the secrets of the chapter. Therefore, the only exit is the grave. The trials vary from chapter to chapter, but the core tenet remains the same. Survive at all costs. A boy might be stripped naked and cast into a radiation-soaked wasteland with nothing but a knife, told to reach a mountain peak 300 miles away while hunted by cybernetic predators. He might be forced to fight his best friend in a pit of sand, with the instruction that only one may leave the circle alive. This is the first incision on the soul. It is the moment the child learns that loyalty, love, and compassion are liabilities. To ascend, he must murder the part of himself that hesitates. He must look into the eyes of a comrade and see only an obstacle. Imagine the psychological state of a survivor after such a trial. He is perhaps 12 standard years old. He is malnourished, covered in filth, bleeding from a dozen wounds, and he stands over the corpse of the only friend he had in the world. He looks up, seeking validation, seeking some sign that this atrocity was worth it. And what does he see? He sees the impassive, skull-faced helm of a chaplain looking down at him with cold indifference. There is no praise. There is no comfort. There is only the harsh, metallic growl of a Vox grill ordering him to the transport. He is dragged aboard a gunship that smells of incense and old blood, leaving behind his family, his name, and his history. As the ramp closes, blotting out the sky of his homeworld, the boy dies. He does not know it yet, but the human child is already a ghost. What sits in the dark of the hold, shivering as the engines roar towards the stars, is merely raw material waiting for the forge. The transit to the chapter's fortress monastery is often a period of sensory deprivation and terror. These aspirants have likely never seen technology more advanced than a rusted stub gun or a water purifier. Now, they are thrust into the belly of a void ship, a cathedral of Gothic machinery that groans and whispers in the warp. They are herded into pens like livestock, stripped of their rags, and scrubbed with harsh chemical disinfectants that burn the skin. They are shaved bald, removing any tribal markings or signs of their former allegiance. They are given simple tunics and serial numbers. The dehumanization is systematic. The chapter serfs, failed aspirants who survived but were not compatible with the gene seed, look upon them with a mixture of pity and jealousy. These serfs are the first warning of what lies ahead: twisted, broken men who serve the demigods in the shadows. The aspirants are told to sleep, but sleep is impossible. The air hums with the vibration of the Geller fields, and the nightmares begin. The journey to the fortress monastery is a passage through purgatory. For a child born on a feudal world where the horizon is defined by the edge of a forest or the walls of a mud-brick keep, the interior of an imperial void ship is a landscape of madness. There is no day or night here, only the relentless, flickering hum of lumen strips that buzz with the erratic energy of a dying generator. The air is recycled, tasting of stale copper, ozone, and the recycled breath of 10,000 crewmen. It is a thick, oily atmosphere that coats the throat and stings the eyes. The aspirants are huddled in the cargo bays, spaces vast enough to swallow whole cities. Yet they are confined to small, caged sectors, watched over by armed serfs who look upon them with a mixture of reverence and contempt. These serfs know that one of these shivering wretches might one day become a demigod, a master of the chapter, but for now, they are less than cattle. They are potential, and potential is a volatile, dangerous thing. The sounds of the ship are a torture in themselves. The distant thrum of the plasma drives vibrates through the deck plates, rattling the bones of the aspirants even as they try to rest. Every clank of a cooling pipe, every groan of the hull as the ship translates through the Imperium, sounds like the growl of a beast waiting to devour them. And in a way it is. To the feral mind, the machine spirits of the vessel are angry gods, and they are trapped within the belly of the beast. They do not understand the technology that surrounds them. When a door slides open with a hiss of hydraulics, they flinch. When a servitor shambles past, a lobotomized human torso fused to a tracked unit, its eyes replaced with glowing red lenses and its arm a hydraulic claw, they recoil in absolute horror. This is their first encounter with the mechanization of the human form, a grim foreshadowing of their own future. They see the dead, slack jaw of the servitor, the drool pooling on its metal collar, and they wonder if this is the fate of those who fail. The fear is not just of death, but of this grotesque half-life, this erasure of the soul while the body continues to toil. When the ship finally breaks orbit and descends towards the chapter's homeworld, the experience is violent and disorienting. The gravity of the planet grabs the vessel, and the aspirants are thrown against their restraints. The roar of atmospheric entry drowns out even their own screams. If they are headed to a fortress monastery on a death world like Baal or Cretaceous, the landing is a combat drop in all but name. The ramp drops with a thunderous crash, and the aspirants are kicked out into the elements. The air might be thin and freezing, searing their lungs with every gasp, or it might be thick with volcanic ash that turns their sweat into gray sludge. Looming above them is the fortress monastery. It is not a building. It is a mountain of ferrocrete and adamantium, a brutalist monument to eternal war. It bristles with macrocannons that could crack a moon, and void shield generators that hum with a headache-inducing frequency. It is a structure designed to withstand the end of the world, and against its scale, the aspirants feel their significance vanish entirely. They are specks of dust at the foot of a tombstone. They are herded into the intake halls, vast, echoing chambers of stone and iron where the temperature is kept intentionally low to suppress infection and weakness. Here, the true culling begins. The selection trials in the wilds were merely to test their luck and their savage will. Now, they must be tested for genetic purity. The chapter's apothecaries move among the ranks of the shivering boys. These are terrifying figures, clad in white power armor that is often stained with the dried fluids of their grim trade. They wear the narthecium, a gauntlet equipped with drills, saws, and injectors, a tool of healing that looks indistinguishable from a torture device. They do not speak to the aspirants. They do not ask their names. They grab a chin with a ceramite grip that could crush a skull, tilting the boy's head to inspect his eyes, his teeth, his throat. They use auspex scanners that wash the child in emerald light, reading the density of his bones, the efficiency of his heart, the genetic markers in his blood. A boy who survived the killing fields of his home, who fought with the ferocity of a wolf to earn his place, might be discarded here in an instant simply because his tissue compatibility index is 0.01% below the threshold. There is no appeal. A scanner chimes a dissonant tone, and a servitor drags the screaming child away. The others do not look. They have already learned the first lesson of the Astartes. Focus on the mission, ignore the casualty. The room smells of antiseptic and fear sweat, a pungent cocktail that permeates the stone walls. The silence is heavy, broken only by the whir of the scanners and the heavy, armored tread of the apothecaries. This process can take days. The aspirants are given no food, only water laced with electrolytes and sedatives to keep them docile. They are forced to stand in formation for hours on end. If a boy collapses from exhaustion, he is dragged away. If he complains, he is dragged away. The herd is thinned hour by hour, whittled down until only the absolute peak specimens remain. Those who survive the medical screening are stripped of everything that links them to their past. Their clothes, often simple furs or woven fabrics made by their mothers, are taken and incinerated in promethium burners while they watch. It is a symbolic cremation of their childhood. They are shaved completely hairless, head, eyebrows, body, leaving them looking like pale, vulnerable larvae. They are washed again, this time with harsh, scouring brushes and chemical foams that strip the oils from their skin, leaving them raw and stinging. They are then branded or tattooed with a barcode or a chapter surf number. They are no longer Kale or Varus or Jack. They are aspirant 9-7 Delta. The loss of the name is a profound psychological blow. In many primal cultures, the name is the soul. To take it is to kill the spirit. And that is exactly the point. The chapter does not want the spirit of a feral boy. They want a blank slate upon which they can inscribe the psycho-conditioning of the Astartes. As they stand in the cold, sterile halls of the fortress, shivering in their identical rough-spun tunics, they are introduced to the hypnocasks for the first time. These are not the deep indoctrination machines they will face later, but preliminary devices designed to test mental resilience. They are strapped into chairs, metal clamps locking their heads in place, and visors are lowered over their eyes. Images flash at rapid speeds, geometric patterns, scenes of war, symbols of the Imperial truth, and horrific images of Xeno's monstrosities. Subliminal audio plays under the screeching static, commands to obey, to kill, to serve. Some boys suffer seizures, foaming at the mouth as their primitive minds crack under the assault of information. They too are removed. The floor is washed down and the next boy is strapped in. It is an assembly line of trauma, a systematic dismantling of the human being to see if the raw material is strong enough to be rebuilt into a monster. The air in the hypno-indoctrination chamber is thick with the smell of ozone and singed hair. It is a scent that will haunt the survivors for the rest of their unnaturally long lives. a sensory trigger that instantly recalls the feeling of cold metal clamps against the temples and the invasive hum of the cogitators boring into the skull. The aspirants who survive the initial screening are not given respite. They are moved to the barracks, which are less like living quarters and more like stone cells carved directly into the bedrock of the fortress monastery. There are no windows here, no glimpses of the sky or the sun. The only light comes from flickering glow globes encased in iron cages, casting long, erratic shadows that seem to dance on the damp walls. The temperature is kept just above freezing, a constant physical stressor designed to harden the metabolism and weed out those with weak constitutions. They sleep on slabs of rockcrete with no mattresses, only a single, thin woolen blanket that offers little warmth. This is the dormitory of the neophytes. It is a place of silence. Talking is forbidden. Any whisper is met with the lash of a chapter serf or the punishing electric shock of a discipline collar. The isolation is absolute, even though they are surrounded by their kin. They lie in the dark, listening to the breathing of the boy next to them, wondering if he will be there in the morning. The psychological pressure is immense. They are being taught that their only relationship is with the chapter, with the emperor, and with the duty that awaits them. Bonds of friendship are severed before they can form. A boy who shares his meager ration with another is beaten, not for the act of charity, but for the weakness of attachment. Dependence is a flaw. The master of recruits barks, his voice amplified by the vox emitters in the ceiling. Your brother is your shield, not your crutch. If he falls, you step over him. If he falters, you leave him behind. The physical training that follows is a regimen of calculated brutality. It is not merely exercise. It is a systematic destruction of the body's limits. They run until their lungs burn and they cough up blood. They lift weights of iron and stone until their muscles tear, only to be healed by rapid clotting stims so they can lift again the next hour. They are forced to fight servitors armed with blunted weapons, machines that feel no pain and have no mercy. The aspirants are covered in bruises, lacerations, and fractures. Their bodies are a map of their suffering. But amidst this physical torture, the first seeds of the transformation are planted. The food they are given is a nutrient-dense gruel, tasteless and gray, but laced with growth hormones and chemical precursors that prepare the endocrine system for the gene seed. They begin to grow at an unnatural rate. Their bones ache constantly as they lengthen and thicken. Their jaws widen, their chests expand. The growing pains are agonizing, a deep, throbbing ache in the marrow that never goes away. And then, the night comes when the true nightmare begins. The aspirants are woken from their fitful sleep not by a siren, but by the heavy, rhythmic thud of armored boots. The apothecaries have returned. It is time for the first implantation. They are marched into the apothecarian, a vast medical amphitheater that smells of antiseptic, blood, and the sacred incense of the machine god. The room is dominated by the surgical tables, cold slabs of steel equipped with restraints and autochirurgical arms that hang from the ceiling like the legs of a metallic spider. The aspirants are strapped down. There is no anesthesia. Pain is the teacher. Pain is the test. If you cannot withstand the scalpel, you cannot withstand the bolter. The transition from man to Astartes is not a magical evolution. It is a biological dismantlement and reconstruction. It is a violation of the natural order so profound that the human body fights it every step of the way. The first organ to be implanted is often the secondary heart, the maintainer. The aspirant lies on the table, his chest shaved and swabbed with iodine that stains his pale skin like old rust. He stares up at the surgical lights, blindingly bright, burning retinas that have not seen the sun in months. The apothecary looms over him, a giant of white ceramite, his face hidden behind a mask of red lenses and a vox grill that renders his breathing into a mechanical hiss. He holds the organ in a stasis jar, a pulsing, dark red lump of muscle that looks too large to fit inside a human chest. The surgery begins with the crack of ribs. The apothecary uses a monomolecular saw to cut through the sternum, the sound a high-pitched shriek that vibrates through the aspirant's skull. The chest is cracked open with spreaders, exposing the beating heart and the heaving lungs. The pain is absolute. It is a white-hot lance that pierces the mind, shattering thought, shattering the ego. The boy wants to scream, but his throat is raw, and often a gag is secured to prevent him from biting off his tongue. He feels the cold air of the room entering his chest cavity, a sensation of violation that is impossible to describe. The secondary heart is inserted, wired into the circulatory system with synthetic vessels and bioadhesives. The shock to the system is immediate. The body recognizes the intruder and tries to reject it, sending waves of fever and inflammation. But the chemical cocktails pumped into the aspirant's veins force the body to accept the parasite. When the second heart begins to beat, the sensation is terrifying. The aspirant feels a double rhythm in his chest, a chaotic drumming that feels like a panic attack that never ends. Asterisk thump thump, thud thud, thump thump, thud thud. Asterisk the blood pressure spikes, flushing the skin red, making the eyes bulge. The rush of oxygen and nutrients to the brain is dizzying. For days after the surgery, the aspirant cannot sleep because the sound of his own blood rushing through his ears is like the roar of a waterfall. He is hyper-aware of his own biology, trapped in a body that is becoming a machine. And this is only the beginning. There are 18 more trials, 18 more mutilations on the butcher's table. Consider the osmodula. This small, tubular organ is implanted at the base of the skull. The surgery involves drilling into the neck vertebrae, a procedure so delicate that a millimeter of error means paralysis or death. Once seated, the organ begins to rewrite the aspirant's hormonal balance. It floods the body with ceramics and growth factors. The result is a period of intense skeletal agony. The bones do not just grow, they harden and fuse. The ribcage, once a cage of separate bones, begins to knit together into a solid, interlocking plate of bone, the black carapace's foundation. The aspirant feels his skeleton becoming a prison. His joints ache with a grinding pressure as the long bones of the legs and arms thicken to support the massive muscle mass that will follow. He can feel his body changing shape from the inside out, a slow-motion explosion of the skeletal structure. He wakes up in the night screaming because his shins feel like they are splitting open. Then comes the biscopia implanted into the chest cavity. It triggers massive muscle growth. The aspirant, still a teenager, begins to bulk up to grotesque proportions. His skin stretches tight, often tearing, leaving silvery stretch marks that map his rapid expansion. He becomes clumsy, his center of gravity shifting daily. He breaks things by accident. A cup crushed in his hand, a door handle ripped off. He is becoming a monster, and he is terrified of his own strength. He looks in the mirror, if he can find one, and does not recognize the face looking back. The jaw is square and heavy, the brow thick, the neck a column of muscle. The eyes, once full of fear, are now hard and sunken. The child is gone. The vessel remains. The psychological toll of this transformation is often overlooked in the archives. We read about the organs and their functions, but we do not read about the dysmorphia. The aspirant looks at his hands and sees the hands of a stranger. He feels the chemical rage of the biscopia coursing through his veins, a constant, low-level aggression that makes him want to strike out, to break, to kill. He has to constantly fight his own biochemistry just to remain calm. The chaplains tell him this is a gift, the emperor's holy wrath manifest in his flesh. But in the quiet of the barracks, it feels like a curse, feels like losing control. The transformation continues, a relentless assembly line of biological horror. The implantation of the hemastamen is particularly insidious. Inserted into a main blood vessel, typically the aorta or the femoral artery, it alters the very composition of the aspirant's blood. The surgery requires the aspirant to be hooked up to a dialysis machine the size of a battle tank, his entire blood volume drained and cycled through the device while the organ is seated. He lies there, pale as a corpse, feeling the cold creeping into his extremities as his life fluid is siphoned away. The machine gurgles and pumps, a rhythmic, mechanical heartbeat that mocks his own. When the blood returns, it is different. It is high-efficiency blood, richer in hemoglobin, capable of clotting in seconds. But to the aspirant, it feels like liquid fire running through his veins. The new blood carries oxygen with such potency that his senses sharpen to a painful degree. The smell of the antiseptic becomes overpowering, stinging the nose like ammonia. The hum of the lights becomes a roar. He can hear the heartbeat of the apothecary standing 3 meters away. It is sensory overload, a migraine that encompasses the entire body. Then there is the liman's ear. The surgery to implant this organ involves the removal of the outer ear and the reconstruction of the inner ear structure. The aspirant's head is clamped in a vise, and the bone behind the ear is drilled away. The sound of the drill vibrating through the skull is deafening, a high-pitched whine that seems to originate from inside the brain itself. The organ allows a space marine to filter out background noise, to hear a pin drop in a storm, and to maintain perfect balance. But the adjustment period is a nightmare of vertigo. For weeks, the aspirant cannot stand without vomiting. The world spins violently. He feels like he is falling constantly, even when lying flat on his back. The floor seems to tilt and pitch like the deck of a ship in a warp storm. He has to learn to walk all over again, his brain struggling to interpret the new flood of vestibular data. He stumbles through the corridors of the fortress monastery, clutching the cold stone walls for support, while the serfs watch with averted eyes. He is a toddler in the body of a giant, helpless and disoriented. Perhaps the most disturbing of all is the hemophagia. Implanted into the spinal cord or the stomach lining, this organ allows the Astartes to absorb memories from the flesh they consume. The implications of this are glossed over in the heroic tales, but the reality is grotesque. To test the organ, the aspirants are often forced to consume raw meat, sometimes from animals, sometimes, in the darker rituals of certain chapters, from human cadavers or failed aspirants. The texture of raw, cold flesh in the mouth, the metallic taste of blood, the gag reflex fighting against the command to swallow. It is a scene of primal abjection. And then the flashes come. Not their own memories, but fragments of another life. The fear of a prey animal being hunted. The last moments of a man dying in the snow. These alien thoughts intrude upon the aspirant's mind, blurring the lines of his own identity. He wakes up crying from a dream that belongs to someone else. He looks at his hands and wonders if the thoughts in his head are his own or merely the echoes of his meal. It is a violation of the sanctity of the mind, a form of cannibalistic telepathy that erodes the concept of the self. The process spans years. The aspirant grows from a child into a towering, slab-muscled neophyte. His skin thickens, bonding with the black carapace that is implanted under the dermis in sheets of hard, black plastic. This final surgery is extensive. The skin of the chest, back, and shoulders is peeled back, flayed open to allow the carapace to be slid underneath. It is then sutured back in place, but the interface ports, the sockets that will connect him to his power armor, are left exposed. They are open wounds that never truly heal, rimmed with metal, sensitive to the touch. The aspirant is now a cyborg in the truest sense. He can plug himself into a machine. He can feel the diagnostic spirits of the armor as if they were his own nervous system. But without the armor, he feels naked, incomplete. The black carapace itches constantly, a phantom sensation of something crawling under the skin that he can never scratch. He is encased in his own hardened flesh, a prisoner of his own biology. By the time the implants are finished, the aspirant is unrecognizable. He stands 7 feet tall. His features are coarse, brutalized by the growth hormones. He has no hair. His body is a tapestry of surgical scars, injection sites, and the heavy, black ports of the carapace. He is strong enough to crush a human skull with one hand, fast enough to catch a thrown knife. But he is also in constant, low-level pain. The organs do not sit quietly. They hum and throb, a biological engine that runs hot. He sweats constantly, his body temperature running higher than a normal human's. He requires massive amounts of calories to function, driven by a hunger that is voracious and unending. He is a weapon that requires constant maintenance. And he is alone. The boys he arrived with are gone. Either dead on the operating table, rejected and turned into servitors, or transformed like him into strangers. They look at each other and see only the uniform of the flesh. There is no room for the softness of friendship in a room full of monsters. The body is now forged. It is a masterpiece of genetic alchemy, a tank made of meat and bone. But a weapon without a guidance system is useless. The Imperium cannot trust a teenager with the power of a god. The mind must be broken, reshaped, and hardened just as the bones were. This is the purpose of the chapter Cult and the deeper levels of hypno-indoctrination. If the physical surgeries were a violation of the body, the psychological conditioning is the murder of the soul. The neophyte is taken to the reclusium, the domain of the chaplains. The air here is heavy with incense, so thick it hangs in blue clouds near the vaulted ceiling. The walls are adorned with the skulls of martyrs, thousands of them, staring down with hollow eyes. It is a place of death worship. The neophyte kneels on the stone floor, often for days at a time, reciting the litanies of hate, the catechisms of war. He is forbidden to sleep. Whenever his head nods, a servoskull buzzes him with an electric jolt or a chaplain strikes him with a crozius. He must learn to function past the point of exhaustion, to let the prayers bypass his conscious mind and embed themselves in his subconscious. He repeats the words until they lose all meaning, becoming just a rhythm, a pulse, a background code that runs his brain. Suffer not the alien to live. Blessed is the mind too small for doubt. Innocence proves nothing. These are not just slogans, they are programming commands. The hypno-indoctrination machines are now far more invasive than the screening devices. The neophyte is strapped into a sarcophagus-like pod. Needles are inserted into the base of his skull, directly into the neural ports. Visual and auditory data is streamed directly into his cortex at speeds no human mind could process. He lives 1,000 lifetimes in a few hours. He fights simulated battles against orcs, eldar, and tyranids. He dies in these simulations over and over again. He feels the phantom pain of claws ripping him apart, of bolter rounds exploding in his chest. The machine teaches him tactical doctrine not by reading a book, but by burning the information into his neurons. He wakes up knowing how to strip a bolter blindfolded, how to pilot a rhino, how to kill a man with his thumbs, but he doesn't remember learning it. It is knowledge without context, skill without experience. But the most terrifying aspect is what the machines take away. To ensure absolute loyalty, the chapter must erase the attachments to the neophyte's past life. The memories of his mother's face, the sound of his sister's laughter, the smell of the rain on his homeworld. These are identified as inefficiencies, as vulnerabilities. The psychosurgeons locate these neural clusters and excise them. They don't just delete them, they overwrite them. Where once there was a memory of a warm meal by a fire, now there is a memory of the Emperor's light. Where once there was fear of the dark, now there is only the burning hatred of the mutant. The neophyte emerges from the pod feeling hollowed out. He knows he has lost something precious, but he can no longer remember what it was. He feels a phantom limb pain in his soul, a grieving for a self that no longer exists. He tries to recall his real name, and finds only a serial number and the name of his chapter. This is the true meaning of, and they shall know no fear. It is often romanticized as supreme bravery, a conscious choice to stand against the darkness. It is not. It is a lobotomy. The neural pathways that process terror, the fight-or-flight response that has kept the human species alive for millennia, are chemically and surgically severed. A space marine does not feel fear because he physically cannot. He looks at a towering demon of the warp, a creature that would drive a normal man to madness, and his heart rate does not flutter. He does not feel the cold grip of panic. He feels only a tactical assessment. Target priority. Weak points. Ammo count. This lack of fear disconnects him from the humanity he protects. He cannot understand the screaming civilians he stands over. He cannot empathize with the guardsman who is shaking in the trench next to him. To him, their fear is a defect, a malfunction. He looks at them with the cold curiosity of a scientist observing a lab rat. This is the tragedy of the Astartes. They are the defenders of humanity, yet they have been stripped of the very thing that makes them human. They are aliens in their own home, isolated by their own perfection. The psychological conditioning creates a being of singular, terrifying purpose, but it also creates a profound emotional isolation. The neophyte, now fully indoctrinated, moves through the fortress monastery like a ghost in a shell of ceramite. He is surrounded by his brothers. Yet the nature of their brotherhood is not one of warmth or camaraderie as we understand it. It is a bond forged in shared trauma and programmed loyalty. They do not share jokes or dreams. They share tactical data and prayer. In the mess halls, the silence is deafening. Hundreds of transhuman warriors sit at long stone tables, consuming their nutrient paste with mechanical efficiency. The air smells of recycled sweat and the faint, metallic tang of the amino porridge. There is no laughter. There is no debate. There is only the sound of spoons scraping against metal bowls, a rhythmic, industrial cadence that mirrors the soulless nature of their existence. They are a hive mind in all but name, driven by the will of the chapter master and the phantom dictates of a distant emperor. Deep within the reclusium, the chaplains continue their work. They are the architects of the Astartes psyche, and they are ruthless. They patrol the rows of kneeling neophytes, their skull helms gleaming in the candlelight, searching for any sign of hesitation, any flicker of the old self. If a neophyte shows a moment of doubt, perhaps a hesitation in reciting a litany, or a flinch during a pain tolerance test, he is pulled from the ranks. He is taken to the confession booths, small, soundproofed cells that smell of stale blood and fear. Here, the correction takes place. It is not merely physical punishment. It is a psychological dismantling. The chaplain demands the neophyte confess his weakness, confess the sin of his humanity. Why do you hesitate, brother? Does the memory of your weak flesh haunt you? Do you yearn for the soft embrace of a mother you no longer have? The questions are designed to shame, to make the neophyte despise his own lingering humanity. He is taught that every human emotion, sorrow, pity, longing, is a crack in his armor that the enemy will exploit. He must fill those cracks with hate. Hate is the only emotion allowed. Hate for the Xenos, hate for the heretic, hate for the mutant. It is a cold, focused fury that burns out everything else. This erasure of the self extends to their perception of time. For a space marine, time is not measured in days or years, but in campaigns and battles. The long periods of transit in the warp, the centuries of cryosleep, the endless drills, it all blurs into a single, continuous gray existence. They do not age like men. They do not see their bodies wither or their hair turn gray, unless it is a genetic quirk of their chapter. They are frozen in a state of perpetual warfare. A Marine might return to the world of his birth after a century of service, only to find his entire civilization gone, his family dust, his culture forgotten. He stands on the ruins of his childhood home, a towering giant in power armor, and feels nothing. The psycho-conditioning prevents the grief from taking hold. He registers the loss as a fact, a data point, but the emotional connection is severed. He is a man out of time, a relic of a war that started 10,000 years ago and will never end. He has no future, only an eternal present of violence. We have spoken of the creation of the monster. Now we must speak of the monster's life. The glory of the Space Marine is a lie sold to the masses. The reality of their existence is a grind of logistical misery and sensory horror that would break a mortal mind in days. When the call to war comes, the Astartes does not march out to a fanfare. He is loaded into a drop pod or a thunderhawk, encased in his power armor. This armor, the holy power armor, is a technological marvel, but it is also a coffin. Once the seals are locked, the Marine is hermetically separated from the world. He breathes recycled air that tastes of rubber and ozone. He drinks recycled water that is filtered from his own waste. He is fed nutrient paste through tubes directly into his mouth or stomach. He can remain in this suit for weeks, sometimes months, without ever taking it off. Imagine the physical reality of that. The skin, despite the interface ports and the black carapace, chafes against the undersuit. The smell inside the armor, after weeks of combat, is a horrific miasma of sweat, blood, waste, and chemical propellant. The autosenses of the helmet filter some of it out, but not all. The Marine is trapped in his own filth, a prisoner of his protection. The armor's machine spirit buzzes constantly in his mind, a stream of tactical data that overlays his vision. Target reticules, ammunition counters, biostatus readouts. His field of view is a cluttered mess of information. He can never just see the world. He sees it through the filter of a targeting computer. A sunset is not beautiful. It is a glare hazard. A forest is not nature. It is cover density and ambush potential. The world is reduced to geometry and threat assessment. The deployment via drop pod is a violence unto itself. The pod is fired from orbit, screaming through the atmosphere like a meteor. The G-forces are enough to liquefy internal organs, kept at bay only by the Marine's enhanced physiology and the armor's dampeners. The heat of entry turns the hull cherry red. Inside, the Marine is rattled like a stone in a tin can. The noise is deafening. The roar of the retro thrusters, the scream of the wind, the explosive bolts blowing the hatches. When the pod slams into the ground, the impact is like a car crash. The harness releases and the Marine charges out, bolter roaring. There is no transition. One moment he is in the silence of the void. The next, he is in the hell of the battlefield. The combat itself is a sensory nightmare. We see the cinematics of Space Marines wading through enemies, invincible and stoic. We do not see the gore. A bolter round does not just kill a man. It explodes inside him. It turns a human body into a mist of red vapor and bone fragments. The Marine is coated in this visceral slurry instantly. His armor is slick with the blood of his enemies. The noise of the battlefield is amplified by his lineman's ear, filtered but still overwhelming. The screams of the dying, the roar of explosions, the chatter of the vox-link. It is a cacophony of death, and he must process it all instantly without pause. He kills with the efficiency of a machine. He does not hesitate. He steps on the bodies of the fallen, their bones crunching under his magnetic boots, and he feels nothing. But the war does not end when the shooting stops. The aftermath is often worse. The Marines must police the battlefield, recovering the gene seed of their fallen brothers. This is a grim, sacred duty. The apothecary moves from corpse to corpse, using the reductor to drill into the chest of a dead Marine and rip out the progenoid glands. The survivors watch this butchery with a solemn reverence. They know that one day, it will be them on the ground, having their chest cracked open by a brother to harvest their glands. They are not just soldiers. They are crops. Their bodies are vessels for the gene seed, and that seed is more valuable than their lives. They are merely the carriers, disposable husks to be discarded when they are broken. The downtime between battles is non-existent. On campaign, a Space Marine might go weeks without sleep, his brain kept awake by the catalepsia node. This organ allows him to shut down parts of his brain sequentially, sleeping while awake. But this is not true rest. It is a fugue state, a gray hallucination where reality blurs. He might be marching, patrolling, or cleaning his weapon, but part of his mind is dreaming. This leads to a dissociation from reality. The line between the waking nightmare of war and the sleeping nightmare of his subconscious fades. He begins to see enemies in the shadows. He hears the voices of the dead in the static of the vox. The psychological strain of the long war begins to tell. The oldest Marines, the veterans and dreadnoughts, are often barely lucid, lost in the memories of battles fought centuries ago. They are ghosts haunting their own armor. Consider the diet of a Space Marine on campaign. There are no feasts. There is only high-calorie, amino acid-rich paste that looks like wet cement and tastes like chalk. It is designed for maximum absorption and minimal waste. Eating is a chore, a refueling stop. They consume thousands of calories in a sitting, their enhanced metabolisms burning through it like a furnace. The hunger is a constant companion. The omophagia itches, urging them to consume the flesh of the enemy to gain intel, a dark temptation they must constantly resist, or in some chapters, indulge. The thirst is unquenchable. Their bodies run so hot, burn so much energy, that they are always on the edge of dehydration, drinking liters of recycled water just to keep their organs functioning. And then there is the isolation from the Imperium they serve. To a Space Marine, a normal human is a fragile, slow, confusing creature. They move in slow motion. They speak in riddles of emotion and illogical desire. A Marine trying to communicate with a planetary governor or a guard commander is an exercise in frustration. The Marine speaks in tactical certainties. The human speaks in politics and fear. The Marine looks at the human and sees a creature that breaks easily, that dies from a simple fall or a stray microbe. There is a profound disconnect. The humans look at the Marines with awe, yes, but also with terror. They see the giant, hulking monsters with faces like gargoyles, and they recoil. The Marine sees this fear. He knows he is a savior who is feared by those he saves. He is a guardian monster, kept in a cage until the wolves come, and then put back in the cage when the killing is done. He belongs nowhere. He has no home but the war. The psychological distance between the Astartes and the humanity they protect is nowhere more evident than in the rare moments of interaction outside of direct combat. Picture a space marine standing in the bustling market square of a hive city he has just liberated. The smoke of the battle still curls from the ruins, mixing with the smog of industry. The citizens, filthy and traumatized, emerge from their shelters. They see the giant in their midst, his armor scarred by lost fire and claw marks, his bolter maglocked to his thigh. They fall to their knees. They weep. They try to touch the hem of his tabard or the ceramite of his greaves. To them, he is an angel sent by the god emperor. But to the Marine, this adoration is alien. He looks down at them through the red tint of his lenses. His tactical display highlights them not as people, but as civilian assets, biomass, or potential obstruction. He scans the crowd for threats, his hand hovering near his weapon. He does not feel pride. He does not feel warmth. He feels a vague irritation that they are cluttering the landing zone. He hears their prayers, a cacophony of desperate, superstitious pleading. Bless us, Lord Angel. Save my child. Touch me and I shall be healed. The Marine knows he cannot heal them. He is a destroyer, not a healer. His hands are designed to crush throats, not to bandage wounds. He has no medicine to give them, only death for their enemies. The irony is bitter. He has sacrificed his humanity to save them, but in doing so, he has lost the ability to understand what he is saving. He is protecting a concept, the Imperium, but he has no connection to the reality of the people who make up that Imperium. He is a gardener who pulls weeds with a flamethrower but has never smelled a flower. When a child, brave or foolish, runs up to offer him a trinket, a piece of scrap metal, a flower growing in the ash, the Marine does not know what to do. His programming offers no protocol for gratitude. He stares at the offering, his mind whirring with threat analysis. Is it a grenade? Is it a toxin? When he realizes it is harmless, he simply ignores it or worse, steps around the child as if she were a rock. The child's face falls, the illusion of the benevolent angel shattered by the cold indifference of the demigod. This isolation breeds a deep, unspoken resentment within the ranks of the Astartes. They look at the squabbling nobles, the corrupt bureaucrats, the weak-willed masses, and they wonder, is this what we bleed for? They see the decadence of the Spireborn while they live in monastic austerity. They see the cowardice of the politicians while they face the horrors of the warp. This is the seed of the transhuman dread in reverse, a contempt for the mortal. It is a dangerous line of thought, one that has led many a Marine down the path of the traitor. Why should the strong serve the weak? Why should the lions protect the sheep when the sheep are diseased and ungrateful? The chaplains work tirelessly to suppress these thoughts, preaching the duty of the strong to protect the weak. But the doubt is always there, a whisper in the back of the mind during the long, silent vigils in the void. And so we come to the end. What is the retirement plan for a space marine? There is none. There are no pensions, no cottages on a pleasure world, no memoirs to be written in a quiet study. An Astartes fights until he dies. That is the contract. The only release from his duty is the cessation of his brain function. But even death is not always the end. For the heroes of the chapter, for those who are broken in body but whose minds still burn with the will to fight, there is a fate far worse than the grave, the dreadnought. To be interred in a dreadnought is considered a great honor. The chapter's tech marines and apothecaries speak of it with reverence. The ancients, they call them, the old ones, but strip away the religious awe and look at the horror of it. A marine is mangled in battle, perhaps blown in half by an artillery shell, his limbs severed, his organs failing. He is dragged from the field, barely alive, clinging to existence by the thread of his Susan membrane. Instead of being granted the emperor's peace, he is brought to the apothecarian. His broken body is surgically reduced. Whatever limbs remain are amputated. His sensory organs are removed. He is reduced to a wet sack of meat, a brain and a spinal cord floating in a tank of amniotic fluid. This sarcophagus is then wired into the chassis of a walking tank. The neural links are plugged directly into his cerebral cortex. He wakes up, not in a hospital bed, but in a cold metal box. He tries to move his arm, and a hydraulic piston hisses, raising a multimelta. He tries to see, and a sensor array flickers to life, feeding him a grainy, digitized view of the world. He has no sense of touch. He cannot feel the wind on his face or the ground beneath his feet. He is a brain in a jar piloting a war machine, and he is trapped there forever. He can never leave the sarcophagus. He will never again taste food, never again feel the warmth of a fire. He is kept in stasis between battles, asleep in a dreamless void, only to be awoken when the chapter needs his firepower. The experience of being a dreadnought is a slow descent into madness. The slumber of stasis is not restful. It is a gray, timeless fog. When they are awoken, it is disorienting and painful. The tech marines chant the rites of awakening, jarring the ancient's mind back to consciousness. Awake, brother. The war calls. The dreadnought groans, the sound amplified by external speakers. Asterisk, is it war again? How long has it been? Asterisk, a century. A millennium? The concept of time dissolves completely. They begin to confuse the battles of the past with the present. They see enemies long dead. They call out to brothers who have been dust for 1,000 years. The tech marines have to soothe them, guiding their confusion into rage, aiming them at the enemy like a senile guard dog. It is a torture of the soul, a denial of the rest they have earned. They are ghosts enslaved to a machine, forced to kill long after they should have been at peace. For those who avoid the dreadnought sarcophagus, the end is usually violent and lonely. A bolt round to the head, a claw through the chest, a plasma burn that vaporizes the torso. They die on distant, nameless worlds, far from the light of Terra. Their bodies are often unrecovered, left to rot in the mud or be eaten by Xeno's beasts. If they are lucky, their gene seed is harvested. If not, their legacy dies with them. There are no funerals for the rank and file. A name etched on a wall in the fortress monastery. Perhaps, but who will read it? The new recruits? They are too busy trying to survive the trials. The veterans? They are too busy trying to forget. The space marine dies as he lived. A tool, used until it broke, and then discarded. But there is a darker fate than death in battle. The genetic flaws, the curse of the blood. Every chapter carries a taint, a shadow in the helix. For the blood angels, it is the black rage. A marine, noble and proud, suddenly falls to his knees, screaming. He is lost in a hallucination, reliving the death of his Primarch Sanguinius. He sees everyone around him as traitors. He attacks his brothers, his mind shattered by a psychic trauma echoing across 10,000 years. He is taken by the chaplains, painted black, and sent into the death company to die in a frenzy of berserk violence. He dies not as a hero, but as a madman, foaming at the mouth, hacking at phantoms. For the space wolves, it is the wolfen curse, the regression into a bestial, werewolf-like state. The mind fades, replaced by the instincts of a predator. The hands lengthen into claws, the jaw extends. The marine becomes the very monster he was sworn to hunt. He is locked away in the Tower of the Lost, howling at the moon, a tragic beast who remembers nothing of his duty. Or consider the fate of the renegade, a marine who sees too much, who questions too deeply, who realizes the Imperium is a rotting corpse not worth saving. He turns from the light, but there is no freedom in the dark. The Chaos Gods are waiting. They offer power, yes, but at the price of mutation and slavery. The marine who sought freedom becomes a slave to a darker master. His armor fuses to his flesh. Horns sprout from his skull. His mind is filled with the whispering of demons. He becomes a creature of pure malice, hunting his former brothers, driven by a bitterness that consumes his soul. He is still a weapon, but now he is wielded by madness. Ultimately, the life of a space marine is a tragedy of scale. It is the sacrifice of the individual for the survival of the species. But is the price too high? We look at the Astartes and we see the pinnacle of human evolution. But perhaps they are an evolutionary dead end. They cannot breed. They cannot create. They can only destroy. They are the sterile mules of the Imperium, strong and stubborn, but incapable of building a future. They fight to preserve a humanity they can no longer participate in. They are the watchmen on the wall, staring out into the dark, knowing that eventually, the dark will win. And when the end comes, when the golden throne fails and the stars go out, the space marines will be the last to die, standing alone in the cold, surrounded by the corpses of the civilization they gave everything to save. They will die wondering if any of it mattered. They will die as they were born, in blood, in pain, and in the dark.